Hi guys, it's so good to be back on camera with you guys. So today I wanted to do some artwork inspired by Norman Percival Rockwell. He was born on February 3rd, 1894. So obviously over 100 years ago, right? Turn of the century. And he passed away on November 8th, 1978. So he died in the 70s. So before the 80s, before the 90s, think of just like kind of culture at the time. In like the 70s, that's like flower child, hippie dippy movement. That's when he passed. Okay, so he was alive for all of that in between. So the early 1900s and then into 1920s when you have like flappers and prohibition and like all that. And so throughout his life, he lived through many iconic and recognizable time periods that you guys know and like recognize, right? And like World War II and World War I, like all of that he was alive for. So it's really interesting because his job was to create publication illustrations. So he's a painter and a designer, like a graphic illustrator. So now we call them like graphic designers, but when he was doing the job, it was more of like an illustrator, like a graphic illustrator, someone who illustrates books, things like that. So his were all very iconic images that he created for publications. So the most famous of his is the Saturday Evening Post magazine cover, and he did that for 5 decades, so for 50 years. Could you imagine having the same job for 50 years? I do the same work, but I've only been alive to do the same work for like almost 20 years, right? But it's not like I'm working for the same exact boss, the same exact company doing the exact same thing. So originally he wasn't really considered like a painter. Like he was a painter, but like other painters were like, yeah, but that's not real like art. That's not real art because it was just going in a magazine or a newspaper or publication. So they didn't really consider it like fine art. And as you learn about art, you'll notice that there's differences. There's like artists and there's makers and there's craftsmen and there's like commercial art, and then there's fine art. And the fine artists, I do consider myself a fine artist at times. So I do a little bit of fine art, but some fine artists only do fine art. They only do fine art. And they kind of like look down on the other types of art forms. And so that's really unfortunate because they're not seeing like the skill or that, you know, the commentary that the person is bringing to their artwork. Anyway, I know it's a longer introduction than usual, but I was really fascinated about reading about him because obviously I knew who he was, but I didn't realize like his life history and stuff. So anyway, he also had a 64-year relationship with the Boy Scouts of America and doing publications for Boys Life or Scout Life is what it's now called. So he was also doing work for them, which is interesting. So at the same time he's working for one publication, try to think about doing that. One painting a week already sounds daunting enough. Like that's enough of a challenge for most artists. So he was doing that, but then at the same time, he was also doing other publications for other companies. So that's just crazy to me. I'm just gonna go ahead and read through anymore and see. It says that he produced over 4,000 original artworks in his lifetime. Wild. So anyway, the point is that he's really cool. I'm gonna show you how I interpret his style. Basically what I want you guys to do is he was always doing like things about real life. So what he would do is he would take reference images. His first wife, he took like a photo of her and he like painted, or he used her as a model and he painted some of his iconic work that way. So that's one option you have, is to like look at somebody in real life and do sketches and then do that. The way that I encourage my students to do, especially when they're starting out, is to take a photo of something. It could be a photo of your family or a photo of like just your siblings or like whatever, but something from regular everyday life. So I'll show you one of his famous paintings here. And you can see that the mom or the grandma is serving family dinner. I think it is the mom, but just like people age differently now. So anyway, but she's serving like Sunday dinner, right? Like it's like, oh, it's a feast. And that's one of his most famous covers. And so anyway, the point is that I want you guys to create something like that from your everyday life. So ideally, what we're gonna do is take a photo on your iPad or on Juliet's iPad, on someone's iPad, take a photo and then you're gonna trace it on the iPad using just a regular piece of paper, and we're gonna use the iPad like a light box. So for this technique to work, you're gonna be using regular pencil to start, regular pencil, plain sheet of paper, and your iPad. And that is gonna let you trace the basic shapes of the things you want to include. And so this is kind of like, it's a throwback to like iconic Americana. And it's just going to be an illustration of that. So I'm going to start actually working on it, and I'll walk you through what we're doing.
Okay, so the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have your brightness turned up all the way on your iPad, and that if you have it in a case, you take it out of the case just for these few seconds so that you have a flat, smooth surface to work on. And you're just going to simply start by pressing very lightly with your pencil on your iPad to trace the image you've selected. And you have to be really careful, because if you push too hard or if you move your fingers while you're holding the iPad, it can slide in and out of the frame, and so you might move the picture. So just try not to touch the iPad like screen as much as possible, but you're just tracing the big shapes, so that way you can put everybody where they belong and get the big bold shapes of like their shirts, their arms, their face, and any objects they might be holding. In this case, I chose a photo of my family on bicycles, and it kind of made some weird shapes with like the helmets and things like that, but it also gave it a little bit something more interesting than us just taking like a posed photo. So try to take a picture of you guys actually doing something, or a moment where you felt like it was interesting, or just part of your daily life. And then the other thing I noticed too was that I was trying to figure out the lighting. It's actually much better if the lights in the room are dark and the screen is bright. That's how you're going to get the best lighting. So on this one, you can actually see when I turn the lights down that now you can see the screen just a little bit better, and that's a little bit more helpful. And then you're just using regular paper, so it's pretty thin, so you should be able to see the shapes fairly easily, but super fine details like nose and eyes might be frustrating. That's okay. Just keep going, kind of place things out where you think they're gonna go, and then afterwards you can look at the original photo and go back and forth and kind of see exactly where things belong. Also, this is just our practice at realism and trying to get things a little bit more realistic than a cartoon or a sketch. So it might not turn out exactly like a photo the first time you do it, but as you keep practicing, you will get closer and closer to a realistic photo. The Norman Rockwell paintings, I think, are done in like a watercolor wash for most of those. What you can do here is we're going to use watercolor, and then you can actually go back over with a little bit of colored pencil and like lightly blend things where you think they might need to be darker or lighter. And that's another technique that you can use. I like to layer watercolor and then let it dry and then do colored pencil on top. So that's totally an option for you. But here I am just kind of finishing up those details, making sure everything stays in place. It does get kind of frustrating that the screen keeps moving in and out, but just reset the picture, try to line it up where you were already on before, and then just keep going. And here I am lifting it and lowering it so that I can see what I'm actually drawing, because when the shapes start to get really detailed, you might not be able to tell if you're drawing like the bike frame or the bicycle seat or someone's hand. And so it helps to like kind of hold it in place and check like what you're actually drawing, like what object it is and where it actually ends up on your picture. You can also omit things or leave out things that you don't need. You could increase the detail with somebody's glasses or their lips, but like I'm going to leave out some of the branding or logos and super fine detail of these pictures so that I don't have to have as much detailed watercolor painting, because I'm trying to capture the idea or the essence. Now, if you want to spend a lot of time on this and you're really trying to make it photorealistic, maybe you don't leave anything out. For me, not as important. And then once you're done, you're going to go back in with watercolor paint and do some light painting of the colors that you think are closest to what you have in front of you. So maybe the skin tone's not exactly right. That's okay. Just do your best with what you've got, the materials you have in front of you. And then add in those details. I like to jump around between colors, doing one area and then another area, then another area, so none of the wet spots touch each other.